We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
Encara Messi, 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 gol, 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 gol.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
This is the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast with Gary Curneen.
Hello, welcome to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. My name is Gary Curneen. Joining me for this episode is Tony Elliott. He is currently a goalkeeper coach with Bristol City Women. Phenomenal resume in the game, both as a player and a coach at a lot of different levels as well. England blind football goalkeeper coach, English FA Futsal goalkeeper coach developer, does a lot of good work online too, and is also the author of A Modern Approach To Goalkeeping, which I hope you will check out after this interview for sure. So we don't do a lot of goalkeeper interviews. We've had two really good ones in the past with David Priest and Shaka Hislop. But I wanted to take this one in a different direction. Instead of talking about goalkeeping in general and the modern game, I wanted to look at how do you interact and manage goalkeepers and goalkeeper coaches in your environment as either a director or a head coach, whatever role it is in a club. So something that I've started to consider more and more in recent years, and really good insight from Tony here that you're going to enjoy. So please let me know what you think at Gary Curneen on Instagram, at Gary Curneen on Twitter. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to support it, along with getting a little bit more exposure to more content online, more webinars, please check out the Modern Soccer Coach community platform. For just $6 a month, you get access to over 300 video session exercises, monthly webinars, regular online discussions where coaches can share knowledge openly, get different detail perspectives on a variety of topics within the game. So just this week we've uploaded our October webinar, which was breaking down a low block. I've looked at different ways to break down a team who is committed to defending deep for the majority of the game. In other words, how do you beat a team that's parked the bus? So I've looked at 10 ways to break them down with some video analysis. I've added some training session ideas, some player development ideas. So please feel free to check it out. There's a little preview of the latest webinar on my YouTube page, Gary Curneen. You can go to modernsoccercoach.com/community to sign up and take a look at the platform, or you can go into modernsoccercoach.com/shop. Order yourself any of the books and you get an annual subscription for only $60. Really appreciate the support from all the coaches around the world on this. Here is Tony. Enjoy. Tony, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. Excited to have you on.
Yes, pleasure, Gaz, and thank you for inviting me. I'm humbled and honoured to be asked.
Just to give us a little bit of more perspective, we just said there before we started recording, from a head coach or from I suppose just a traditional coach, field coach point of view. Start on this here and then we'll see where it goes. So one of the decisions that Pep Guardiola has made when he came to Man City was obviously changing Joe Hart and the goalkeeper in order to play the type of game that he wanted. Mm-hmm. Do you think today, everyone wants to play this progressive style of football. Can you do that with a goalkeeper who's not comfortable with the ball at their feet?
I think it's making it more tougher now in the modern game, Gaz. I think you've seen, Guardiola, it took him 2 or 3 goalkeepers to find the one that he actually wanted. He has his mindset on a certain way of playing, and obviously when you look at Ederson now and his capability with his feet, his range of passing, literally, and it is that term, I guess he is like an 11th player now. Fantastic when teams want to press City high, because that's like playing into their hands. At the end of the day, if you've got a goalkeeper like him that can just pick a pass out anywhere on the pitch under pressure, and teams try to press you, it's so dangerous for opposition teams to do that. I think, as I said to you, it's becoming more and more difficult now if your goalkeeper can't play with the feet. Purely and simply, I think because a lot of coaches now are sort of trying to do it the Guardiola way, or to at least play out from the back, and I think it frustrates a lot of people sometimes, the football supporters around the country and around the world who are used to sort of the goalkeeper getting it and just either giving it to somebody that can play or just booting it up the pitch. It's not that way now. People are becoming more accustomed to the goalkeeper having the ball and looking for options, when they've got the ball at the feet, and trying to be very selective when they're playing the ball out. And that could be simple as, the way that the new goal kick rule has come into play now in terms of restarts. You've got defenders dropping off nearly to the goal line now to receive the ball off the goalkeeper. That's frightening some supporters to death because it's something that they're totally not used to. But teams are now working on that. They're inviting the press, and then they're using the goalkeeper as an overload, and then they're out and up the pitch very quickly. So you've got to have a goalkeeper not just that can defend the goal and he's good with the hands and in terms of shot stopping, but also now that can play with the feet. Not just good with the feet, but good with both feet. Because they're expected to work as a pivot player now and play out from both sides of the pitch and have a passing range with both feet if that can be worked on and coached. So I think if you can find a goalkeeper with that capability now, it's going to add a massive plus to your squad. But I think as goalkeeper coaches, we must now work to develop our goalkeepers, not just on the quality of the pass, but the range of passing. And also to work on both feet because it's becoming more and more prevalent in the modern game.
Pep's a bit of a trendsetter, obviously, in the coaching community for the past few years, at least. This movement with the goalkeeper and the innovations that he's done with the goalkeeper in terms of the build-up play and then the team selection and the recruitment ways. Have you seen it benefit the goalkeeping community with head coaches putting a bit more emphasis there, or has he almost set the bar a bit too high? Have we got to learn to walk before we can run, so to speak, with the goalkeepers?
No, I think, to be honest with you guys, I'm loving it because I think it's really challenging the goalkeeper coaching fraternity. We now, as I said to you, we've been used to, working in isolation with our goalkeepers. The head coach will go, yeah, you take the goalkeepers and, we'll see you in an hour or an hour and a half, and then, we'll join in for half an hour, have a five-a-side or a game, and that's it, done, see you later. But now, for me, when I work, I try to work my practices and my work in isolation with the keepers very much linked to the themes or the patterns that the head coach wants to sort of work on in training. So, if we're working on, for instance, the coach is working on in possession in a session, and we might be facing an opposition, in playing in a particular way, then my practices will try to match that and be relevant to that so that the goalkeepers are ready to go into those practices and they've been primed already with the structure that I've brought in with my session. So if we're doing in possession stuff as a group, then surely my work with the goalkeepers must try and match that. So we do a lot of work around in possession, working on the control, working on the touch, working on the short, medium and long distance passing, sometimes on a post, sometimes opposed. So when the goalkeepers go into the practice with the squad or with the group, they've already done something relevant to what they're going to be going into. Yes, we'll still work on, handling and movement around the goal, but if there's a big theme that's maybe in possession, then I'll try and make my work with the keepers in isolation as much geared towards that next part as I possibly can. And obviously, you flip it vice versa. If we're doing a lot of out of possession stuff, the team's working on defending, then my work will, dictate as such what the keeper's going to go into in that next phase. So we'll look at stuff on defending the goal, defending the area, defending the space, and that all then makes sure the goalkeepers are ready, as I said, and primed to go into the next part with the group. I think now, for me, I think as goalkeeper coaches, we've got to be comfortable with, not every day, if we're working full time, not every day having massively long sessions with the goalkeepers before they link in with the group. I'm more than comfortable to do a 20-minute, 30-minute warm activation and warm-up session with the goalkeepers, and then for them to quickly be linked in with the team, because then that's where they're going to be gaining opportunities to make decisions based on what they're going to be going into in the games at the weekend. So for me, that's more important. So I'm not precious and possessive over I must have an hour or an hour and a half with the goalkeepers every day. That's my mindset. That's how I've changed, and I think it works for both the goalkeepers and the head coaches who they're going to play for.
Yeah, that's a great point there. Offsetting your work with the session plan from the coach in terms of the principles and the themes. Whenever you're then going into, that session, the breakdown of that session, you don't need an awful lot of time. Do you get them out a little bit earlier and do what you need to do, or do you like to have them as much as possible with the team, or how's that broken down?
Yeah, so again, I'll gauge it depending on day by day, guys. If I can pinch an extra 20 minutes, here or there, then I'll do that. I think the other thing is that, we're very much under the watchful eye of our sports scientists now, who gauge every minute that the goalkeepers, the players, take part in the session. So, as I said, back in the day, you could have the goalkeepers out for 3 hours and nobody blink an eye. Nowadays, they're very much, working around the GPS units, working on, their loading and everything else. So we have to be quite careful as to how much time we actually do try and pinch and how much extra work we're giving the goalkeepers. I try and fit in with everybody. I try and keep a happy medium. As I said to you, I'm not precious and possessive. I work very closely with my goalkeepers, recognise what their needs are. But then I'm also comfortable linking in with the sports scientists, working on the physical side, of the goalkeeper's preparation, making sure that we don't load them at the wrong times of the week, especially as we get closer to the games. And then obviously working hand in hand with the head coach and assistant coach to know exactly what we're doing during the week, what we're doing in, the sessions in particular. Is it in possession, out of possession? And how I can then complement what they do with the way I link the goalkeepers into the practice. And as I said, I find that it's working quite smoothly, and I think everybody's enjoying the process now.
Let's go back to the piece on the head coach and the relationship between head coach, and talked about Pep Guardiola and the demands of it. Have you seen that relationship between the head coach and the goalkeeper? When I started being a coach, I've always been, as a head coach, I've always been fortunate to have really good goalkeeper coaches, and I've always let them do it, and I've never really had a close relationship with the goalkeeper. Does a head coach today need to have a closer relationship? Have you seen any movements in that?
In my view, yes. I think that's where we're heading. I think it's very important now. You look at the goalkeeper coach's pathway, who not only goes and qualifies himself as a goalkeeper coach by doing specific goalkeeping courses, but we also have to go through the pathway of being an outfield coach, what we do in the UK anyway. So you can't just go and say, right, I'm going to specialise in my goalkeeping and just do the goalkeeping qualifications. In England, we have to go along the pathway of gaining an outfield qualification first before we can then go and qualify as a goalkeeper coach at the same level. So from my point of view, I particularly think that's right, because then you've got a broader idea of the game itself before you actually go and specialise in, the role of the goalkeeper and the pivotal role they now play in the modern game. I'm fortunate I played the game, so I was a pro for 14 years, so I have that experience and knowledge to fall back on. But I think having gone through the outfield coaching pathway, and then sort of jumped across and sort of finished off my knowledge around goalkeeping with some real expertise from some fantastic people. That then has enhanced me as a coach, and hopefully, the head coaches that we work with as goalkeeper coaches, will now see the benefit of including us in conversations, in looking into what we do and how we work and how we prepare the goalkeepers, but also being open-minded enough to sometimes ask us for advice, or or for us to share that knowledge and experience that we've had that may complement the whole group and not just the goalkeeping unit. That's for me where the open-mindedness of the outfield coaches is of paramount importance. If they're closed off, then you've got a bit of a problem. But I think it's also to do with your belief and your confidence as the goalkeeper coach, and trusting in what you know and the knowledge that you have, and not being afraid to challenge sometimes what people's thinking might be and what their rationale behind decisions are. I'm fortunate enough to be working, with a head coach at the moment, and she's very open to my knowledge and my opinion on things. And as I said, I'm finding it's working very well, and hopefully that will benefit the keepers and the squad that we're working with.
Yeah, that synergy is so important in staffs and just getting the environment right. I wanted to get your thoughts on, again, that chemistry and synergy in an elite environment between goalkeeper number 1, 2, and possibly goalkeeper number 3. How do you manage or balance the fact that they're all, you want to keep them competitive for their, you keep pushing each other, but then how important is it that they're all, a club or a team within a team?
Yeah, so, people talk about it in a sense, it's a goalkeeping union, which I think it very much is. We have a slightly different group ethic, work ethic, I guess, way of working with each other because, it is that specialist position on the pitch that requires specialist work. All players, have their own way of developing their skill sets, but as a goalkeeper, it is a very specific set of skills that goes into complementing the squad. People often ask me the same question, and I think it's all to do with the environment you create. I think it's about sort of the way you work with people, the way you connect with people, and making sure that they quickly get an understanding of what you require to make your group of goalkeepers work for the betterment of the whole group, the whole squad. So it's creating an environment, creating a culture that's, one of learning, one of sharing knowledge, one of being prepared to back each other and support each other regardless of who's playing. At the end of the day, guys, there's only one, position on the pitch that the goalkeeper can fill, and that's as the number one, the one who's playing. So only one of your group of keepers can play, in any particular game. So from my point of view, I think it's just creating an understanding, but also, being open enough with all of them to be honest with them. So if they're not performing or there's elements of the game that they need to develop to get them to that next level, then we must be honest enough with them to share that detail and to make sure that we try and help them develop so that they can then go and compete for that number one jersey, I think it's just constant conversation, making sure that they're always okay. I think not, treating any of them with any sort of favouritism. I know it's a danger, and I've seen it happen where certain goalkeeper coaches can get too pally, too close, too friendly with the number one, and they forget that they might have another one or two goalkeepers to sort of keep happy and fulfil on a daily basis. So, I try and keep the group together, keep them close. I always involve them, as a group in terms of analysis, and going through footage and clips. Even if we're looking at, the clips and the footage of the goalkeeper that's played, I'll always bring the other goalkeepers in to share what they think and not be afraid to give their opinions on things. I think it's an open door, an open table as such for others to express what they're seeing and what they think, might help the individual or the group develop, to become better goalkeepers. So I think, as I said to you, it's also about you as an individual, as a coach, and believing in what you know, believing in what you do in your processes, but also having the confidence enough to say that, yes, I agree with that, or no, I don't. And this is the way sometimes that you might have to work. You might have to ultimately make the final decision on things and have real clarity on the way you want your goalkeepers to work. So I think the shared process, keeping the group together, always having conversation with them, always being in contact and touch with them without being too much in the face. I think that's of vital importance for all the goalkeepers that you work with.
You've worked with a lot of teams, both as a player and as a coach. What's your take on who's making the decision for the number one spot, and what's the best way to facilitate that to that goalkeeper union?
Yeah, I think ultimately, look, we work with the goalkeepers day in, day out. We whether that be short periods of time, longer periods of time, you do your work off the pitch with them in the classroom. Ultimately, the decision of who plays is the head coach. There's no getting away from that fact. But it's like I've said to you before, I think it's very important. If you're working with these people on a daily basis, you probably know a lot more about them than the head coach will. Then it would be naive of the head coach not to ask your opinions and what your thoughts are. And, as I said, over the years, I've been fortunate enough to work with some fantastic head coaches, some great people. More times than not, they've come to me to ask my opinions. And generally, they'll listen to those opinions. On the odd occasion, they won't, or, they've got a gut feeling that they have to go with. And I've no issue with that. Ultimately, they're the head coach and it's their head on the block should they not get a result. But it's always an interesting one if you give advice and you give an opinion and the head coach goes against it and then the results don't go their way, suddenly you get the evil eye and, well, you can't turn around exactly and say, well, I told you so, can I? So that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult, you know. Then you just have to kind of buffer it, you know, and just get on with your job. And, you know, under your breath, I guess you sometimes think, well, you should have listened to me, you know. But I'm old enough now and experienced enough to know that, in general, the coaches will ask an opinion. More times than not, they'll go with that opinion, and I'd like to think that, you know, it is more times than not the correct opinion, and judgment doesn't let me down far, you know, too often, mate.
Yeah. So then, on that, what's your involvement, or what is a typical or a effective goalkeeper coach, head coach involvement in a game? When you're sitting on the bench, are you just in an observation role? Do you still think you can make an impact during the game? Is it just a support system? How do you work through that?
No, I think, you know, my view is, look, and I think this is of vital importance. Any member of staff, you know, so look, the head coach, they select who they want working with them. They have their own selection processes and philosophy. You know, sometimes it's just good friends that they know, they can trust, and sometimes they might be not the most knowledgeable people, but they know more times than not they're going to back them. You know, whatever the case, I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing sometimes. My view is, I think it is a trust thing, but it's also a trust of knowledge and understanding and, you know, of the game. You know, my role in particular, it's multifaceted, so it's not just as the goalkeeper coach, you know, look after set plays. You know, you look into the opposition goalkeepers, you're looking for fallibility in them that you can maybe offer to your field players so that they've got a little bit of an awareness around possible weaknesses of the opposition goalkeeper. Game to game, generally, it will be a support role. Obviously, you know, you look after the goalkeepers in the warm-up and everything else, but during the game, I'll be keeping a close eye on set plays. You know, so if there's anything different from what we've seen or that we've worked on in analysis, then I'll have to quickly see that and share that to the players on the pitch, and the head coach is normally comfortable with me, you know, standing and then going and giving an instruction instantly, because if we talk about it, discuss it, it's too late. You know, we need to, if we see things, we need to get it out there, and there needs to be an action created from the players. If it's wrong, then we discuss it after. Hopefully you get it right more times than not. Generally, you know, we do. And then, you know, there might be the odd situation where, you know, the goalkeeper makes a poor decision, or, you know, I think the old traditional one, if a goal goes in and it's a goalkeeping mistake, you know, you'll get the look of the wrath of the manager. But listen, I understand that, and you know, nobody's infallible. You know, nobody's, you know, fully perfect. So there are going to be situations sometimes when that happens, and you deal with that. I think that's the important thing then, is that, you know, you back your goalkeeper, but, you know, they've also got to understand if they made a mistake, and they're responsible for that and culpable, you know. So, as I said, mainly about support. You look after the head coach, you offer your bits of gold dust when they need it, but you're there for them, and hopefully that helps add to the group and complements the detail that they're getting from the head coach and assistant coach without coming across too heavy, you know. So I'm not constantly standing up, I'm not constantly bellowing detail out. You know, obviously when we have substitutions, I'll be giving detail to the subs coming on, what their roles and responsibilities are in set plays, and it just takes a little bit of pressure off the head coach and the assistant coach, and they can fully focus on what's happening on the pitch at the time. So we just try and share the load, and if people need to bounce things off you, then you do that. You're there for them and they know that, but you're not in the face all the time, you know.
What's your level of input then with the goalkeeper, that player-coach relationship at half-time? Do you let them breathe, stand back? Do you have a process that you go through? What's your insight there?
Yeah, keep it short and sharp, you know. And again, goalkeepers of the level that I'm working at, guys, they'll know. You know, they you know, they're very self-aware, and that they'll fully know more times than not as to what's right and what's wrong. If they've done something really well, they don't need me patting them on the back, because they know they've done that. And at the end of the day, that's their job. They're paid to sort of keep the ball out of the net, or to pass the ball 20 yards with quality to a player that's going to receive, and so on. And if they don't do that, they, at the same token, they understand and know that. Same token, they don't need me in the face having the right pop at them, you know. I think for me, I've used the term, you know, and I've used it for many years now, and I think it's just recognising when, where and how to sprinkle that little bit of gold dust that they might need. That could be during the game. It could be one little shout across the pitch or a little bit of information in a break in play. And literally at half time, it could just be one or two key pointers that you might see that might just help them for the next phase of the game, the second half, or it might just help them in the long term. So I think, depending on the level that you're working at, it'll also depend on the individuals you're working with and recognising whether they want that feedback or not during the game. Because a lot of goalkeepers, they're just focused on the job. They don't want to be discussing things or talking about things. It might purely and simply be that you leave it and then you discuss it after the game, or you do it during analysis in the following week. Again, currently I'm working with goalkeepers that are very open, very willing and receptive to accept detail and those bits of gold dust. And that suits us down to the ground as a group. So keep it short and sharp, not too much in the face. If they need it, they'll know, and you can offer that, and hopefully that'll help them develop through the next phase of the game or moving forward.
Yeah, that role then on game day as a facilitator between goalkeeper, head coach, goalkeeper coach. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Whenever Sarri and the Kepa incident, and you're sitting on that Chelsea bench, how would you have handled that?
I'll be totally honest with you. Kepa wouldn't have reacted that way if he was one of mine, because he'd have understood the environment that I've created. So whether that's contentious or not, I wouldn't have liked to think a goalkeeper that I work with would have dealt with that situation in that way. So, it's a tough one. It's a tough call, because obviously there's a lot of conversation around the why and what was going on and everything else. But at the end of the day, the manager wanted to make a decision, and ultimately you go with what the manager says. I think that was the beginning of the end for Sarri, rightly or wrongly. But I would like to have thought that a goalkeeper that I work with would have looked at, and I'm not going to suggest that they bow to authority, but at the end of the day, there was a reason why that situation was wanted to be happening, but he undercut the manager big time on that situation. And I don't know whether that was the right thing for him to do. Probably won't be held against him in his future. These players are earning hundreds of thousands of pounds, so they're an asset. And trouble is, sometimes people don't want to upset them because they're that much of an asset. But in uncertain terms, whether he should have done that during the game or after the game, it would have been told. And that would be my view. So many people will challenge that and question that. Yeah, he's done it because he was all right. But I think the other thing was there wasn't enough communication had, possibly over the situation. And even during when it was happening, I think it was messy. You know what I mean? Maybe not the right people was trying to get information to him, or he wasn't discussing it enough with individuals, or who's to know what was discussed before the game. So I just think the whole thing was messy. But at the end of the day, from my point of view, and I guess, it's down to a respect thing. If the manager's wanting something to happen, then you go with that. He clearly on that day decided it was his decision. And he's made that call, and I think it was an embarrassment for a lot of people on that day, which was a shame, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's still fascinating, Tone, like 8 months, 9 months later. I mean, I still look at it and think, without passing judgment and not knowing behind the scenes what's going on, 20 years ago, I would have thought if there was a goalkeeper coach on the bench, he probably didn't have much of an input. But we are now in 2019 where, even in our environment here, our goalkeeper coach, Ratty, is so heavily involved in the day-to-day that he could not get, if there was a situation like that,
exactly.
It seemed as if he was sitting minding his hope. I don't know.
Well, he was, and I think there was a little bit of, it looked to me as I was, I don't know whether I call it fear or kind of deflection of, I'm not getting involved in that. But for me, this is what I said to before. At the end of the day, my head coach now knows I'll back her to the hilt, and if she makes a decision, ultimately, especially on the big stage, I would never go against it. That's just not what you do. Do you know what I mean? You might, quietly challenge it or have a conversation, but you would never, in front of thousands of people, not back the head coach in that situation. Clearly, the communication had broke down. As I said to you, I think things weren't great at the time there. I think there was a lot of issues around the whole setup and maybe disjointedness, shall we say, and it just got messy. And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, really. In terms of his future at the club, it did undermine him. It looked like the player was making the decision ahead of the coach, and that created the difficulty for him. And ultimately, he left the club. Albeit on the back of a bit of success. So. No, an interesting one. Like I said, Gaz, we're talking about, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, no. But we're in the modern game now. Everything's changed. The whole process, the whole game has changed. And we have to be so careful now as to how we approach things, really, because of the ramifications that might come off the back of a word in somebody's ear or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, So you do have to watch your backs now, which is a dangerous place for us to be in. But ultimately, we've created it.
They have indeed. Those situations that come up with pressure, have you been exposed to, either as a player or as a goalkeeper coach, that situation where you've taken the goalkeeper off in the penalty shootout?
To be honest with you, no. We've recently, obviously a lot of my work has been around the blind squad, the England blind squad. So, obviously a lot of our games will go to penalty shootouts, and we often have conversations around, which goalkeeper we should use. But I think ultimately, you'd like to think that your goalkeepers are equipped enough to deal with those situations. People go back to the Holland situation a few years ago where, they changed the goalkeeper for penalties and it turned out to be successful. Very few and far between. Is that luck? Is it judgment? It's hard to call. If the player hits it in the opposite corner, then they score and nobody then says, oh yeah, what a great decision. It's the same with substitutions. During the game, you can keep players on the field and suddenly you make a substitution, the sub comes on and scores. Oh, it's a wonder decision and fantastic. Well, listen, if it's going to happen, mate, it's going to happen. Sometimes fate plays a part, and I think very rarely would I be comfortable throwing a goalkeeper on that hasn't had any contact with the ball or been involved in the game of, at any point, other than just, analysing and watching from the side, and then suddenly they're in what could be, one of the biggest moments for that team of a season, or perhaps in a year or whatever, or a decade. It's such a risky thing to try and do. So I think all I try and do in those situations, especially when you go into cup ties and that, and again, this is where that joined learning is very important, and group learning is that all keepers would have awareness around, the opposition penalties and who their penalty takers are and where they normally try to place them and so on. So, if they're involved at any point, if your starting keeper's going to do the penalties, fine, they know the information. If the bench keeper has that detail, and let's say, for instance, the starting keeper gets injured or sent off, or, then they're ready and prepared as well. But I don't know how comfortable I'd be in changing the keeper for a penalty shootout, because it might just throw up trouble, as it has been proven with the Chelsea situation. Clearly Kepa didn't want that to happen. He thought he was prepared, and that's why he's stuck to his guns. But I think, as I said to you, if that's been discussed before the game, and he's been told that if it goes to penalties, they're going to change him, then for me, the fella's made the wrong call, because he must have agreed to it, or, there must have been some kind of discussion had, and then in the heat of the moment he said, no, I'm going to stay, and that's caused the problem, So we'll never know, because, at the end of the day, they haven't shared it, they haven't, divulged that information, not fully anyway, and we'll probably never get to the bottom of it, but hopefully I won't ever be put in that position.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting book when that one comes out someday.
Yeah, it will be, mate. It will be. I'd love to see the look on some people's faces when they see the full detail and the honest detail of what went on.
A common complaint over here, or a challenge at the youth level especially, my goalkeeper doesn't communicate enough. What's your tips to help develop this?
Well, I think straight away people just use that term communicate or communication. To me, guys, that's very fluffy. There's not enough detail in that. Well, what are you actually asking your goalkeeper to communicate? How are you asking them to communicate? For me, there's many, many different facets of that term that needs to be offered to the goalkeeper in terms of understanding and development. For me, they need to instruct. Yeah, they need to give information. There's also the way in which they do it, and again, I'll go back to the blind squad, working with the goalkeepers in blind football, sometimes in terms of communication can be very different to the way you work with a goalkeeper in the team that of players that are fully sighted. The pitch and tone of the voice, the projection of the voice is absolutely pivotal when a goalkeeper is working with a blind footballer, because they can either create calmness or they can create chaos, depending on how they deliver that message that they're trying to get across to that individual. The slightest offset or wrong way of delivering that message can be very costly. And that's the way I tend to work with goalkeepers. I think the other thing is when people talk about communication, does your goalkeeper actually know what they need to say, when they need to say it, and how they're going to deliver that message to the player that they're giving the detail to? I think more times than not, coaches, per se, don't spend enough time, not just on the pitch but off the pitch, giving the detail to the goalkeepers that they work with to help them enhance their skill set, to enable them to be able to give that detail specifically in the moment, depending on the situation that's happening in front of them. And that can literally be, as simple as, if somebody's bearing down on goal, the defender's chasing them down. Well, what do I need to do now? Do I just focus on the ball? Do I give information to the defender? When do I stop giving information and concentrating on the job? So on and so forth. There's so many different things, guys, that can go into the keeper getting that right or getting it totally wrong. I honestly think it is down to detail. It's down to knowing what to say, when to say it and how to say it. And do we as coaches spend enough time working with our goalkeepers on that aspect of the game? For me, I don't think we do, and I think we need to learn more about that, and we need to offer more support to our goalkeepers in terms of that.
Yeah, I experienced that myself about, it must be near 10 years ago now. I was a head coach, balls played over the top, defender stuck at the halfway line, forwards in, 20 yards free, one-on-one with the goalkeeper sprinting out of the goal, screams, away!
There you go.
She goes round her and puts it in the back of the net. I was like, well, your communication was great there.
Yeah. Well, that's it, and I think purely and simply what happens is sometimes we get caught up in so much in the development of the goalkeeper technically, in terms of, in possession, playing with the feet, distribution, so on, out possession, looking after the goal, defending the goal, stopping shots and dealing with 1v1s. We actually forget about the other peripheral parts, which are massively important, So, it affects the goalkeeper and the team in such a massive way. Technically, you're doing that stuff, but tactically, the goalkeepers have got to be so aware now. And that's where I think that connection and integration into practice with the team as much as we can, Gaz, because that then links the goalkeeper with the players more often. They're more familiar with them. The players get used to the goalkeeper's terminology and when they're going to say things, how they're going to say things, what information they're actually giving. But also the goalkeepers put much more often into situations where they're having to make those decisions rather than doing it in isolated practice, a lot of the time unopposed. So there's no real opposition around the goalkeeper for them to have to make those difficult decisions. Integrate them into practice. Give them an opportunity to make those decisions as often as possible. But then I think it's down to the skill set of the coach to not just be able to work in isolation with the goalkeeper, but actually to see what's happening in the game, what the goalkeeper needs to be doing, and then can you help them develop those decision-making processes through the game? And that's down to the coach's knowledge as well, I think,
Where do you stand, talking about goalkeepers' knowledge, where do you stand on these elaborate goalkeeper exercises? I knew this would get a laugh. Well, it's a common conversation in our office. Is it a good way to get the tennis rackets out? Are they a good way to jump over cars? Good way to engage the players or a waste of time?
Goalkeepers, as far as I know, guys, they don't, in the off-season, go and perform at the circus. So I think you'll probably get a gist of where I'm going with this. I think the problem is, look, people that do this kind of stuff, on the eye it looks lovely. And goalkeepers jumping through hurdles, moving through cones, all host of kind of different stuff. But how relevant is that to the actual movements and actions they create in a game? Very little. Like people still do a lot of plyometric work in terms of, cone work, like stepping over cones and that kind of work. But again, I challenge it because how realistic is to the flowing movements that you want the goalkeepers to be making in practice. Whenever did a goalkeeper move across the goal and chop their feet, if you understand what I mean? So lifting the knees up high to move to a position, very rarely. I think for me, when I work with my goalkeepers, I try and restrict the amount of equipment I use because, again, they'll be looking for those as reference points when they're playing games. It's very difficult because they're not on the pitch. You know what I mean? We play with the ball and line markings and grass, or turf or whatever they're playing on. They're very rare. You ain't going to have discs and markers and cones and everything else all over the pitch. So, again, get your goalkeeper familiar and used to using the field itself as reference points. Obviously when they play in stadiums and that, they can use the boardings and other things around the environment to give them reference points. That's fine. But that's not actually impeding the movements on the pitch. But try and keep the practices as realistic as you possibly can. Because then what that will do is give the goalkeeper patterns of how to move, how to work, how to find positions on the pitch realistically when they're going to game situations, So I understand there's a place for everything. So if you're doing physical work, fitness work, especially pre-season, things like that, fine. Or, all that equipment will serve a purpose. But if you do it too much, the goalkeepers become too patterned in the movements, too rigid in the movements. And I think it becomes inhibiting, in terms of their realism when they go into game situations. It's my view. It's not going to appeal to everybody, and I'll get shot down for it by some that love to do these kind of practices. But generally, the other thing that I think, guys, it gets views on YouTube, or it gets views on or shares on Twitter and Facebook and everything else, and then suddenly people get massively high profiles based on what? Because they can throw a few markers down. But can they actually coach the goalkeeper to become better and develop their skill set in each aspect if they haven't got all that stuff out on display? I doubt it very much, but that's my opinion, and some may shoot me down for that.
One of the most common emails I get over here is from colleagues looking for hiring goalkeeper coaches. Do you know a goalkeeper coach? Have you any good ones around the area? When we're going through this process of hiring goalkeeper coaches, obviously from a head coaching perspective, it's not the same circles or community that we're used to. So what should we be looking for when we're hiring goalkeeper coaches, and what separates an average one from an excellent one?
Well, I think for me, first and foremost, guys, and this is the way I work in life now anyway, and I say to everybody, I think you've got to look at the person first. I think it's all right if somebody's, knows their onions and are a good coach, but if they can't connect with people, if they don't show respect or they can't communicate or... they just, they're not a holistically built individual, if that makes sense. Then I think you're asking for trouble. I think, they've got to be able to connect with the players that you're working with, and people ask me sometimes, you worked in, I've worked across 6 different formats of the game now. If you include futsal, if you include football mainstream with men's and women's, if you include the disability format, cerebral palsy, blind, and I've worked with deaf players. So that's 6 formats of the game. For every format, guys, you have to be able to link and connect with people in a slightly different way. So unless you're that type of person, that way inclined, where you can adapt, where you have empathy, where you have a belief in what you do, where you know how to share and deliver your message, it ain't going to work. But I think some coaches find that difficult enough in one format. And again, it's not an ego thing. I'm not saying all that to impress you, just to impress upon you that I think more than anything now, it's about the person. So if you can get that right, if the individual's trustworthy, if they'll go above and beyond, if they'll back you and support you, that's massive to what you're doing. And then, for me, you look at the qualities of the coach. So what's their knowledge? Have they got a bit of background in the game? That helps. It's not always has to be that they've got a fantastic background in the game and played as a professional, but if they've played in the position, then at least that helps, and they've got some things they can reference to and fall back on. But I think, what diligence have they then paid in terms of their own development? Have they spent time developing themselves as a coach? The qualifications help, but also who have they linked with? Who have they worked with in the past? Who can you go to and say, look, what do you think? If somebody wants to employ me now, guys, I can give them a list of people and go to them people. And it's not mates of a mate, it's people that I've worked with and I've done a job for that have appreciated what I've done, and now then hopefully give me a decent reference or a glowing, this is Tony, this is how he works, this is how he operates, and it helps you moving forward because you've gone above and beyond and done the job that you've been asked to do. So you have to look at the individual holistically. How do they prepare? How much time do they spend on session planning? What detail do they go into to make sure that the goalkeepers are supported or the players are supported in the right way? I said to the role I have, it's multifaceted. It's not just looking at the goalkeeper. It's also looking at set play analysis. It's looking at, opposition goalkeepers. How much can you not just work with your goalkeepers, but help the group? How much can you input into, all right, what's going to get us a result this weekend? Because it might be one or two little pieces of gold that I could share with the forwards on the opposition goalkeeper that's going to get us a goal in the game that will win the game for us. And I think for me, that's what you need to be looking for in your coach. And I think the other thing is to look for someone that doesn't have too much of an ego attached. Do you know what I mean? So if you need to sit them down and say, look, that didn't go right, that they're not going to come back at you, that they're not going to throw their toys out the pram as such and go in moods and things like that. You know what I mean? That they can take the odd hit on the chin and deal with it, but come back better and stronger, and look at themselves, in a sense that, maybe I should have been better in that, and this is what I'll do next time to make that better. So for me, that if I was a head coach, that's what I'd be looking for. That's the type of person I'd be looking to bring into my organisation or my setup. Because that's the way I'd like to think that I work with people when I do, and hopefully it's kept me in the game as long as it has.
You've mentioned there about the work you've done with the England blind team in recent months.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience and then what you've learned there.
Yeah, I mean, look, what a wonderful opportunity it was for me way back when 2013, I think just after the London Olympics, I was offered the opportunity to work with the blind squad. I think it came as part of or an add-on to the work I was doing around futsal. Blind football's a small-sided format in the game, 5-a-side. You've got a goalkeeper, 4 outfield players. So my work around futsal for as long as I've been doing it kind of fit with that. And also I'd been working with the England cerebral palsy squad for a couple of years. So again, working with players with a disability and then obviously working in the international environment around that helped me. And I think the key was, like with all the formats I've got involved with, I think what I've done straight away is just immerse myself in that format, in that sport specifically. Same as I did with futsal. I knew nothing about futsal, so I went and tried to source as much knowledge, understanding of that format of the game as I possibly could. But then what were the specifics around the goalkeeper? What did I need to do? Did I need to change the way I worked? Did I need to structure practice differently? Did I need to link the goalkeeper into the group in a different way? And it was the same with blind football. You've got a fully sighted goalkeeper, fully able and capable of doing everything that they normally do, and then you're working with blind players, totally blind footballers. So who virtually work on feel and sound, So understanding how pivotal and important the role of the goalkeepers in that format is massive, because they're literally the communicators and the eyes of the team, for a lesser term. So their input, their connection with the players is hugely important, and it challenged me. I looked at it and never once have I gone into a different format or working with a different squad and gone, I can't do this. No, the way I look at it is, right, what do I need to do? How do I need to adapt to smoothly transition into this group without any upheaval for them? So it's not about me, it was about them and about the group. So how can I integrate in as easily as possible without upsetting the equilibrium of the group? And that's all I did. And, got to understand the game, understand the role of the goalkeeper, get to know the rules quickly and the laws governing the game. And then slowly but surely integrating a sort of a practice curriculum based on the realism and relativity of the game for the goalkeepers when we work. And that's what we've done over the years. And now I've been fortunate enough, over the 5 or 6 years I've been around it to work with, in particular, two of probably what I would suggest are two of the best blind football goalkeepers ever. That's Dan James, twice Paralympian, who's now no longer with us, and currently Dylan Malpass, who is a fine young man who had a background in mainstream football, drifted into futsal, and then I sort of pinched him 3 years ago and brought him over to blind football. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. And now, currently, again, not to impress you, but just to impress upon you how quickly Dylan's transitioned into this format. He last year was voted best goalkeeper of the tournament at the World Championships, and about a month ago he was voted best goalkeeper at the European Championships at the Euros, where we got a bronze medal. So we're on the right path with him. He's still young, he's got loads to learn, but I think he can give the sport another 10 years at least. But again, it's now about him. It's not about me. It's about what he needs now to maintain the levels and standards that he's at. What do we need to do to make him even better? But also, how can we add to what he does to complement the group? Because the next time we want to try and win the gold medal, not just the bronze, So we need to be better, in the goalkeeping department to aid the group to get to that holy grail as such, the gold medal, and that's what we'll be doing now. So it's been a wonderful experience. I love it. I love working around the lads. They're a fantastic group. Love working with the goalkeepers. It is a different format in the game, so it challenges you every time you get around it. But the teams around the world are getting better, evolving, becoming better. So we've got to evolve with it, and we've got to keep up to speed with everything that's happening on the global scale.
Last one for you. These different formats of the game that you've been involved in, has this been the inspiration behind the Goalkeeping Intelligence website, the inspiring, stretching, developing a community of critically thinking goalkeeper coaches?
Well, I'd have to tell you that. So the Goalkeeping Intelligence format is a brainchild of Adam Woodage, who and Rich Lee, who were two guys I worked with. Adam actually was the young man that wrote my book, A Modern Approach to Goalkeeping. We connected a few years ago, and obviously we got quite close. And Adam's had a couple of books published, and then we spoke, and he wanted to put some stuff around myself together and how I could share my knowledge, and we did that, and it's been very well received. But Adam actually is the creator of Goalkeeping Intelligence, and it's really just shows his passion for the game. Obviously, he wanted me involved, so I play quite a decent sized part in what happens there, alongside other goalkeeper coaches and consultants around that platform. But literally, it is to bring like-minded people together, to be able to share knowledge openly and honestly, and also to get detail and feedback from in inverted commas experts around the world, in goalkeeping. There's also the opportunity for the learners, so people can take up a subscription and they get access to many different things. There's courses on there, where they can actually do sort of a course where it's modules, and it's sort of distance learning as such, but they can also link in with the creators of those courses, the tutors, to gain further knowledge as they move through the course. So, for instance, I've recently put one on there, which was quite close to my heart, which is now that transferable from futsal to football in terms of goalkeeping and development of goalkeepers. It's huge in the game now in terms of the way the goalkeepers make saves and on the distribution side. But people go on the course, they sign up to the course, and obviously they take up the course and they work through the modules. But at any moment during that process, they can contact me directly via the platform, and I can give them some help and assistance as they work through the course. Obviously, we want them to sort of work off their own back and and research, through the modules themselves. But if there's, ever a point when they reach, a situation where they're not quite sure or something else occurs, then they can contact us directly and we can guide them and help them through the course. And hopefully at the end, we send them away to do a task where they do sort of a bit of a case study around an individual, or how futsal goalkeeping might have influenced goalkeepers in football. And then we assess them, we assess that task, and then we'll give them some feedback. And then once they've done the course, post-course, they're fully in contact with us. So, they're subscribers to the platform, and we can help and guide them through other areas that they may want to sort of enhance their learning. And, we're always on call for them if they need us.
Brilliant. Well, we'll be encouraging all the goalkeepers, all goalkeeper coaches who are listening to get involved in that for sure.
Fantastic.
Tony, thank you so much. This was great. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
No. Yeah, listen, I love sharing the knowledge, mate. And that's what it's about. You can't take it with you. So I think while we're here on the planet and we got the opportunity to care and share, with others, for others, then, as I said to you, I'm not precious and possessive over anything. More than happy to sort of share the knowledge and just make sure that we look after the next generations of goalkeepers coming through, because we have to pass it on at some point,
Thanks so much to Tony for his time and his insight there. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I mentioned at the start of the podcast that something that I'm starting to consider more and more in recent years is how to manage, support, communicate with goalkeepers and goalkeeper coaches in the environments that I'm in, either as an assistant or head coach. And something that I'm definitely changing over the past 10 years. When I was a head coach in college, I had really good goalkeeper coaches, I have to say, but typically I let them just basically work in isolation, not in terms of training. They would do 15-20 minutes before or 15-20 minutes after, and I used them with all the session. But in terms of communication and in terms of aligning them with the vision of how we want to play, I wasn't very good at that there. And now that the game is becoming way more tactical and we're looking at challenging players and we're looking at solving different problems, it's something that I feel that I can get better at as a coach. And that's really the motivation for doing that podcast with Tony, was a lot of self-development and getting different insights. As I've started to challenge myself and try to get a little bit more information, a lot of it's been based on chats with Ratty here in Chicago. One of the things that I cringe looking back on is when I was a head coach and I was younger, Wingate University, I don't know what year it was, we conceded a lot of goals against the run of play in the first 5 or 6 games, and we had an awful lot of possession, an awful lot of shots on target. But when the opposition had 2 shots on goal, they would score 2 goals, and 1 shots on goal, they would score 1 goal. And I brought in the stat sheet to 3 or 4 of my goalkeepers and kind of sat them down and said, this has to be better, this has got to be better, we can't have this few shots resulting in so many goals, and the percentages and the ratios are too high, blah blah blah. It's only recently, with insight from people like Ratty, that I started to get a little bit more awareness in how wrong that was, because as he explains to me, goalkeeping is easier whenever you're making save after save. It's always more difficult whenever you haven't been called into action for 60-70 minutes. It's also very, very difficult to defend against counter-attacks as a goalkeeper. Sometimes it's easier to defend whenever you're in a low block and you have players and supporting around you trying to block shots and block crosses. So just that perspective in goalkeeping and how that maybe changes your mindset and your thought process as a head coach or assistant coach, I feel is very, very important. The game is obviously changing, even by Tony's perspective there, that I really enjoy what he's taken from England blind team, the futsal team, the work that he's doing in the FA, the work that he's doing with his coaching badges, and then the work that he's doing with the goalkeeper community online. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's only fair that if they are going to challenge themselves and get better, then we have to improve our processes around that. So I don't think it's good enough, definitely not good enough, to let your goalkeepers be on their own for 45 minutes and then bring them in at the end for a game. But I don't even think it's good enough now to not involve your goalkeeper in the decision-making process of the play model or the tactical analysis piece and all these aspects of the games that we're trying to get better at as a coach. So really enjoyed that with Tony. Would love to hear your insight, especially from goalkeepers And goalkeeper coaches, I'm sure you have a number of opinions on this interview and would love to hear your thoughts. So please let me know at Gary Curneen on Twitter, at Gary Curneen on Instagram. Thanks so much for listening. I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Soccer Coach Podcast. For more coaching topics, sessions, and resources, head on over to Coach Curneen on Facebook or visit the website at www.modernsoccercoach.com.